Hello, today we're going to have a look at my Atari Jaguar. I've decided to do the 50-60Hz mod purely and simply because I want the games to run a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit smoother. It's been a long time coming. I've been meaning to do this mod for quite a long time, and I thought about time I gave the Jag a bit of love, because there are some quite outstanding titles on the Jag. You've got Doom, you've got Aliens vs Predator, Rayman. There's quite a few quite good titles on the Jaguar, and it's about time that it had a bit of love. So first things first, 4 Phillips screws to remove the outer shell. It's quite easy as a console to get into. Once you're inside, there's some tabs you've got to lift on this metal cage, which allows you then access to get to the motherboard. First thing we're going to do is remove the RF can. Not really needed nowadays, so we need to desolder these points to allow us to lift that from the motherboard. I used this guide from Consoles Unleashed to allow me to identify what particular component needed to be removed to allow me to put my 2 wires on and carry out my 50-60Hz mod. So here we are on the back of the motherboard. Just to the left there's a 0 ohm resistor that we need to remove to allow us to solder our wires. So the mod is pretty simple. All we need is a switch and a couple of wires. All this resistor does is when it's connected, it locks the console to 50 Hz. When that resistor is missing, it then locks it to 60 Hz. So all we're going to do is put a switch in line so that we can choose whether we want it in 50 or 60 Hz mode. Now the little resistor's glued on. Usually stuff's glued on because it's wave soldered. So once we've got that resistor out the way, we're just going to wet up the pads so they're nice and ready with some fresh solder. Always a good idea to check that nothing's lifted or nothing's cracked. So what I tend to do is just make sure everything's nice and clean, nothing's in the way or going to bridge the contacts. Then just go over it with our ohms meter just to make sure that the traces are all intact and everything is all in place. Nothing worse than putting a console back together that you've been messing with and it don't work anymore. So like I say, just double checking that everything's all there. There's no reason to believe that anything wouldn't be, but it's always a good check and good housekeeping. First wire's going in. Now we'll do the second wire. Extremely simple mod this, it's not difficult at all. I could have done a switchless mod, but I didn't really, I just wanted it to work. I don't want to overcomplicate it. Sometimes it's just nice to have something that works, it's simple and just to the switch. I'll put a link in the description to what switch I used. I wanted a nice chunky switch so that I could take out the RF can and put it in place there. I didn't really want to cut the case and put in one of those little micro switches and stuff like that. I wanted it just to fill the hole where the RF can was. What I'm going to do now is just a bit of Captain tape just to stop those wires moving around while I'm reconstructing the console. It's quite easy with these wires, especially at this length, to wiggle and lift the pad on the actual motherboard. Then you're in a world of pain you've got to sort out. Quick double check, make sure nothing's bridged. I'm going to feed the wires up from the underside of the console through this little hole in the top left hand corner of the motherboard. I think that'll be quite nice and neat. I'm very lucky the fact that the wires I actually chose to use do go through this. The wires are quite big, they don't need to be this big. It was just something I'd got lying around and I chose to use something that was long enough for me to use. You don't have to use anything particularly large at all, there's no current really going through this. So there we go, that's nice and neat, I'm quite happy with that. We'll pop this back into the case. It needs to go back into its chassis and back into the actual outer case because the switch goes through both of them. It needs to be tightened up and then we can get it wired in. So there we go, it's all back together. This is the switch I've chose, red, just so it goes with the aesthetics of the console. Double check that works as well. Undo the lock nut, get that popped mounting. It's a little, it just fits. I'd say it's almost perfect. That's nicely lined up. So now we're going to trim the wires into a nice curve. That'll be quite nice. Going to pre-tin all of this and get some heat shrink on. Heat shrink's not really necessary. It's not really going to go anywhere. But just in case the wires break free, it's nice to have a bit of heat shrink on there just to give it that nice protection. And it also, any oxidation or water or anything that ever gets in there helps protect those wires from any external forces, but it's not really necessary if you haven't got any. I've been meaning to do this mod for quite a while, but the Jaguar isn't something I tend to play. I have bursts and play it for a few days and then leave it alone. The trouble with having a large collection, it's knowing what to play and when. Right, that's the heat shrink on. Get the first wire soldered in onto the switch. Once we've got this up and running, I'm going to do a couple of comparison videos of a couple of games, just so you can see the actual difference and whether you'd feel it would be something you'd be worth doing on your console yourself. I bought a Jaguar at launch, and it wasn't something I've ever done, and I don't understand why I've never actually done this mod, and it's took me this long to actually do it. I think a lot of the extra usage of the Jaguar has come about since I bought the Jaguar game drive, so I'd got access to all of the library of the Jaguar and the CD games as well. Really did put an extra lease of life into that this console. So I've got quite a good physical collection on the Jaguar, but there are a couple of titles that I haven't got, such as Rayman. Rayman goes for such a lot of money nowadays, and I do enjoy it as a game. I think it's one of the best versions of Rayman, but it does go for a hefty price. Okay, so that's basically the mod done. We'll do a quick check over, make sure everything's okay. We'll start getting the case back together. This can be a bit fiddly, just if any of the tabs have moved or anything like that. It's just the way that they've decided to make it, really. They haven't used any screws and stuff like that, so just this shield that they've made. So it won't take 2 minutes just to pop all this back together. This is a fully reversible mod. There's nothing destructive about it, which I quite liked. If I wanted to reverse this, I could put it back together as standard if I wanted to. There we go. It's quite a big switch, quite chunky, so you ain't going to break it off, or it's not sticking out too far. So there we go. It's all up and running, which is a bonus. Now we're going to do a couple of comparison videos just to see how they perform and what the actual visuals look like between the two modes. This is Atari Karts. Such potential, this game. It really did. If they spent a little bit more time on it, I think it actually could have been quite a good game. The visuals aren't that bad. Not breathtaking. It doesn't play too bad. It hasn't got the kart, hasn't got the tracks of Mario Kart or the playability. But there is something about it. It could have been more if they'd have had more time. But as you can see, the 60Hz mode is bigger, it's faster, much nicer way of playing it. As a power user obviously in Europe. So that was thoroughly worth it for that on the Mario Kart side. Also going to have a look at Doom. Again, bigger screen, slightly faster. It's night and day actually different to play. I'm quite amazed at how much better it is to play and how much harder it is to play. I think because things are moving that much quicker. Well, that's going to wrap it up really for this video. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again probably tomorrow with a video on the Switch Nitro deck. I'm going to do a bit of a review on that tomorrow, something I've been playing around with for about a week. So we'll see you then. Bye.